All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah, we're going to be resuming our tafsir. And certainly yesterday I noticed that we kind of went skimming over the ayat. So let's just make sure everybody understands this ayah very well before we move on, even though we already stated all the rulings that relate to the previous ayat in 106 and 108, but just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to the meanings and breaking down the meanings and so forth. فإن عثر على أنهما استحقا إثما فآخران يقومان مقامهما. So of course, going back to the story of Adi ibn Badda and Tamim al-Dari, of course, later it was discovered that the jug was found, or at least that silver jug was found somewhere, that it was sold to some people. Then that's when that A was basically putting forward that فَإِنْ عُثِرَ, if it was found that the previous, which is Adi ibn Badda and Tamim al-Dari, that they basically had committed a sin. I want you to look at this one, istahaqqa. Now, istahaqqa, it comes from the root haqqa right there, but then istahaqqa, that it was as if they were the ones seeking this, and as if they were the ones that went running after this sin. You want to remember, it wasn't only to be interpreted as a sin, but also as a penalty. So istahaqqa ithman, this alif right there is because it's a dual. In English, there's no duality, but in Arabic, it's called muthanna. So it would be singular, dual, and plural. Okay, singular, dual, and plural. But in English, it's either going to be singular or it's going to be plural. Okay, but remember, Arabic is very intricate. So here it tells you if they had, as if they were the ones seeking, running after the penalty or running after the sin, and certainly they had, let's say, done some planning in hiding the jug, in making together some kind of an agreement, how to keep this a secret, how to sell it, how much to sell it for, and the price, how to use it, and so forth. So that's why this ayah was saying istahaqqa ithman, istahaqqa, that they seeked the penalty. They went after it. They ran after it. They planned for it. Okay, فآخران يقومان مقامهما. Then, of course, they're going to be replaced. What are we replacing right now? We're replacing their witness, which later was discovered to be a false witness, with right now another witness that basically has, let's say, the truth in what really happened. يقومان مقامهما. What is يقومان مقامهما? يقومان, in other words, that they would stand, they would do, they would represent basically مقامهما on behalf of what they were supposed to be doing, which is honest witness. They didn't do the job. So we're going to replace these two with another two, which of course is going to be presenting the real witness. من الذين استحق عليهم الأوليان. Now this من الذين استحق عليهم الأوليان, the scholars of لغة عربية said that is the hardest sentence to make. What is the word that I could use? Al-i'rab is really like grammatical scrutiny. I went into the details and it was going to be probably really hard for me to break it down and explain the grammar in English because I'm not an expert in English. So I decided to just skip that piece of it. فيقسمان بالله. So what is استحق عليهم الأوليان? So in other words, what the first ones were supposed to be doing, the later are going to do the job on their behalf. In other words, they're going to be void. Their witness is going to be void. Now the new witness is going to take place. فيقسمان بالله لشهادتنا أحق من شهادتهما. فيقسمان بالله. So now the two for later ones would make the oath that their witness was basically coming forth, was containing more truth than the later, or at least the previous, sorry, not the later, but the previous witness. And وَمَا اعْتَدَيْنَا, and we had not committed any transgression, and we are not amongst the oppressors. ذلك أدنى أن يأتوا بالشهادة. When you look at ذلك أدنى أن يأتوا بالشهادة, أدنى actually means, it can mean less, it can mean closer, it can also mean a way to approach something. Okay, so الدنو in general is to make something closer or to make something reachable. Okay, so أدنى أن يأتوا بالشهادة على وجهها. So what are we really doing here? What's the object of all of this? The object is to get closer to justice. أدنى أن يأتوا بالشهادة, meaning that the whole object is to make sure that we are getting closer to justice, we're getting closer to truth, and therefore what we're seeking is a witness that really is coming at what it defines into. What does it define? Well, a witness is supposed to demonstrate justice. A witness and true witness is supposed to represent support for justice. So if somebody is not doing the job and someone is not bringing in this good representation, then in that situation, they would be part of the oppressors. أو يخافوا أن ترد أيمان بعد أيمانهم, or they would fear, or of course, who's Yahafu? Now look at it right there. Who, this is not right now a plural. Who's going to be fearful that some oath is basically lacking truth right there? So it's either one, the court system, or it's the family that basically was supposed to be getting the benefit, which the family of the deceased, or whether we're speaking about people in general, which of course is represented by the court system. So that is what the plural is referring to, and differences of opinions between scholars on what really is this pronoun waw, which is the waw for al-jama'a, which is a plural and indicating the plural form. And this is in order to let us know that the community itself is supposed to have some integrity. There's community integrity and there's individual and social integrity, where the community itself is supposed to be concerned about giving people their rights. Because if people are not given their rights, that is going to create some form of injustice, which basically starts pressuring on the society, and this pressure will create instability and perhaps different instability, whether we're speaking about instability within nature, because instability within nature, we saw during Prophet Shu'aib how the financial instability had created in the nature itself, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically caused the destruction in nature, or whether we're speaking about social. So we're speaking about Qawm Lut, for example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made nature bring about the destruction on them. Now, of course, we know that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has put the power to basically bring in this destruction. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also letting us know that moral injustice, moral instability brings more than just instability that is within the society, but it also brings instability within nature. instability within nature. This is not at all speaking like the different Eastern religions, that there's some kind of a karma and all of that. No, everything's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not energy working within nature where nature is God. Absolutely not. This is kufr to say. This is kufr to say, to think of energy in nature or in the world or wherever it is in the universe, that it's working its way in karma or working in its way in making the differences in this world. No, everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had prescribed the different rulings. These different rulings, they go farther than injustice within the society, but it will also bring an imbalance not only on the society, but it will bring an imbalance even within the world around us, even within nature, even within our finances. The list goes on without us realizing. So أو يخاف أن ترد أيمان بعد أيمانهم. So what happened? Of course, some might actually say, well, how are we going to reject the first yameen? How are we going to reject the first oath? What's going to happen? There's a procedure, certainly, that we need to take in consideration. We need to check the religious integrity of the new witnesses, and of course their mental competence. We need to make sure that they are qualified to bring in the new witness as the new evidence, and basically make the appeal a proper appeal to ensure justice. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْمَعُوا. And you have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, the word ittaqu is in plural here. وَاسْمَعُوا. Isma'u, what are we supposed to be listening to? Listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, listening to His decrees, listening to His principles, listening to His legislature. Wallahu la yahdi al-qawm al-fasiqin. For the Lord Almighty does not guide the people that are fasiqin. We went in details with the interpretation and how we break down the word fasiqin. Now, it's important to keep in mind that when the ayah says, Wallahu la yahdi al-qawm al-fasiqin, it's important to keep in mind that whether we're speaking about false witness or whether we're speaking about sin, that the sin actually has a bigger effect on the person, a bigger effect than just that sin that I committed with that person, but that was basically it. No, absolutely not. Every single sin has its effect and has the potential to even carry you farther and farther away from guidance. Whatever sin you may commit, it has the potential to distance you away from hidayah, away from guidance, and whatever good deed you might do, it has the potential to get you closer and closer. And that's the same thing, even when we're speaking about disbelievers. Somebody that is a disbeliever, of course, with a good act, they are getting closer to hidayah. With a wrong act, they're getting farther away from hidayah. This is everyone. And that's why Prophet Lut alayhi salam, as an example, he was telling them and warning his people, telling them to stay away from this type of sexual aberration. Why? Because it's going to distance them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were not taking tawheed because of the severity of this behavior. It has such a strong potential in distancing them away from Tawheed that they were not even thinking or even processing anything in regards to Tawheed, because the behavior had distanced them so far that they are not even listening to anything in regards to Tawheed. So in order to have them listen, we need them to take away such an aberration attention in order to get them to focus, to hear, to listen, to get different extremities, to get different senses to function normally. In other words, certain aberrations, certain sins can malfunction the person's ability to process in thinking, to process in seeing things, to process in hearing things, and so forth. And without us realizing, just as a sin has the potential to blindfold, to completely block the ears from hearing truth, etc., the same thing. The good acts, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Have taqwa, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the ilm. What ilm? It's not the ilm necessarily of science, but it's the ilm where you're capable of seeing the implications, you're capable of applying, you're capable of recognizing, you're capable of seeing truth, and you're capable of following truth. And the most important ilm is the ilm that leads you to recognizing the purpose that preceded your existence, which is al-akhirah. That's the most important ilm. You can have ilm in engineering, ilm in medicine, ilm in so many different sciences, but if that ilm is just bringing in services to people's dunya, well, good for you. That's definitely a great contribution. But the most important contribution that you would bring into your own life is the purpose that preceded your existence, which is, why were you created? What are you going to contribute for your purpose, for your akhirah, for the reason that you were brought to this life in the beginning? So that's the main purpose. So when you look at وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْفَاسِقِينَ, think of it as any contribution, any potential, whether to the good, it gets you closer to the hidayah, it gets you closer to guidance. And if it's a potential that is containing evil, it will get you away from hidayah and closer to misguidance. Simple as that. That's basically simple science right there. All right. يوم يجمع الله الرسل فيقول ماذا أجبتم قالوا لا علم لنا إنك أنت علام الغيوب. So what happened here? So this ayah certainly jumped a little bit. Did it really jump? What is the connection between this ayah or these ayat and the false witness and the true witness and so forth? How is that a potential, and what are we getting to? Well, can you explain to us the ayat first so we can kind of see what this is demonstrating? All right, first let's read the ayat. يوم يجمع الله الرسل فيقول ماذا أجبتم. On the day that the Lord Almighty, so here's Allah, Lord Almighty, or Allah, God Almighty, would combine all the prophets and he would ask them, what did you respond? What did you say? What did you claim? What did you preach? قالوا لا علم لنا. They would say, we do not know. Wait a minute. So you don't know what you were supposed to be preaching. We're going to get there. إنك أنت علام الغيوب. You are the one that has all the knowledge of all the unseen. We're going to get to why they said that. إذ قال الله. Now, this is a semicolon right there. So what is the statement? Basically telling us that day when they would be combined, and part of those stories, of one of these stories of when they would be told, well, what did you preach? What did you teach? What happened? Tell me part of the conversations. Did you do your job? Did you do your job in preaching? Did you do your job in informing them? Sending the revelation? What did you do? Now, part of those stories, إذ قال الله, إذ, remember, إذ is to bring in a sign and telling you, well, there's a similarity here. There's some story to be mentioned in regards to one, in regards to witness, then two, in regards to the potential that it will have, the true witness, the false witness, and certainly to understand that you probably got away with some things in this dunya, but in the akhirah, the story is going to be completely different, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will combine all the people, including the prophets, and now it's a one-to-one conversation with the Lord Almighty, and there's no worse witness than claiming something to be on the prophet, peace be upon him, or any prophet, peace be upon them, and then make a false witness. There's nothing worse than a false witness against a prophet. Let's say, إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم اذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك إذ أيدتك بروح القدس. Oh, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the Lord Almighty told Isa, Jesus, ibn Maryam, oh Jesus, the son of Mary, remember the blessings that I had blessed you and blessed your mother with at the time, of course, إِذْ أَيَّدْتُكَ, when I had given you the support and I had given you the power with Ruh al-Qudus, with Ruh al-Qudus, the Spirit, or at least the Holy Spirit, تُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا, that enabled you to speak to the people during infancy and during old age. And when I had taught you the book, wisdom, Torah, and the Gospels, and for you to create from clay of what appeared as a bird, all of that is in my order. You would blow in it, and it would become a bird with my order. And you would heal the blind and those that were inflicted with leprosy with my order and my decree. And وَإِذْ تُخْرِجُ الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِي, and when you would resurrect the dead with my decree. And when I had protected you from Bani Israel, from the children of Israel, from harming you, when you had come to them with all the details and the miracles. But the disbelievers of them had claimed that this was nothing but clear magic. And when I had revealed onto, or awhaytu, given the inspiration to al-Hawariyin, to the apostles, that they should believe in the Lord, in me, that is the Lord Almighty, and in the Prophet. So they said, we had believed and witnessed that we are amongst the Muslims. إذ قال الحواريون يا عيسى ابن مريم, يا عيسى ابن مريم, when the apostles, they had said, O Jesus, O Isa, the son of Mary, is your Lord capable of sending down a meal or a supper from the heavens onto us? He responded, that is, Isa alayhi salam, have religious integrity in Allah Almighty if you really are believers. They said, we want to eat from it so we could attain certainty within our hearts, and we would know that you had proclaimed the truth, and we would be witnesses upon the Last Supper, or the supper. That's when قال عيسى ابن مريم اللهم ربنا أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين. Isa ibn Maryam then said, O Lord Almighty, send down a meal from the heavens upon us that would be a holy day for the early ones and the later ones, and it would be a miracle from you. And give us the provisions, and you are the best of who gives provisions. the Lord Almighty had said, إِنِّي مُنَزِّلُهَا عَلَيْكُمْ, I am going to send it upon you. Then whoever denies after that of you, then I will give them a torment. No one will get a torment that is similar to it. Now, وَإِذْ قَالَ اللَّهُ يا عيسى ابن مريم أأنت قلت للناس اتخذوني وأمي إلهين من دون الله. Then, of course, now this wa is telling us that there's a time lapse. Then, when the Lord Almighty says, O Isa ibn Maryam, are you the one that told the people to take and proclaim you and your mother as the divine, as the two gods, other than the Lord Almighty? He said, قال سبحانك ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. He said, glory be unto you. I would not have the right, and it would not be incumbent upon me to say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or not incumbent upon me, but قال سبحانك ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق. So glory be unto you. It would not be fit, more befit, ما يكون لي, it would not be fit that I would say anything what I do not have the right to preach. If I had said it, you would have known it. You would know what is in me, that is my intention, and I do not know of yours. For you are the one that knows all the unseen. ما قلت لهم, I only told them of what you had ordered me to say, to worship the Lord Almighty, to worship Allah, my Lord, and their Lord. وَكُنْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا مَا دُمْتُ فِيهِمْ, and I was a witness as long as I was amongst them. But then when you had risen me, or when you had basically توفيتني, is it risen? Is it put me to sleep? Is it put me to death? We'll talk about it. You were the one that had all the supervision, and you were the one that was seeing what they were proclaiming. And you are the one that is the witness upon all. إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ. If you are to place your torments upon them, they are your servants. And if you are to forgive them, you are the one that is the self-efficient and all-wise. قال الله هذا يوم ينفع الصادقين صدقهم. On this day, the Lord Almighty had said, this is the day that those that spoke the truth, their truth would benefit them. لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار. They will get a paradise, gardens, where water is flowing from underneath them, that is springs, where they would stay eternally there. For the Lord Almighty will be content over them, and they will be content over him. That is the magnificent success. The Lord Almighty is the owner of the heavens, the owner of the earth, and everything that is on them, and everything that is in between them. And he is capable of all. Now, I want you to look at here. You could see that right after this ayah, at least the ayah of Shahada, all right, just after the ayah of Shahada relating to Shahada for the witness in regards to the deceased person, we could see that it was speaking of Shahada, Shuhud, Shaheed, etc. Again, it was emphasizing the same word again and again, and therefore the ending of this ayah, you could see that this is the ending of this ayah, and after every surah, the ending would basically give me the final ibrah, the final theme, the final lesson to learn from, which is right there. هذا يوم ينفع الصادقين صدقهم. This is the day where whoever had presented truth, whoever was speaking the truth, whoever was living the truth, whoever was being committed to truth, this is the day that it will actually come to the best of their benefit, and that's what they will get. The reward is Jannat, gardens on تجري من تحتها الأنهار, where they would stay there eternally. The Lord Almighty would be رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه. He would be content over them, and they would be content over him. And at the end, bringing in the final closure, لله ملك السماوات والأرض وما فيهن. For the Lord Almighty belongs the ownership of the heavens and the earth and everything on them. Now, looking at these ayat, now we get to see the correlation between the previous ayat and certainly these ayat. But it's important to mention that there's a lot more details. There are a lot more details to mention in regards to these ayat. So let's see some of the details that al-Qurtubi wanted to say. يَوْمَ يَجْمَعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ. He said, well, what's the connection? What's the relationship between this ayah, which is this one, and the previous ayah that we were just doing? He said, well, the relationship is that it is basically in order to deter away from anybody, deter away from any behavior where the person is concealing something different than what they're revealing. So what does that mean? So in other words, for example, there's the witness. You recognize that this person had made you as a witness upon something. What are you concealing? Are you hiding the truth? Are you concealing the truth? Or what are you really saying? It's all about living honesty. It's all about living the integrity. So therefore, the relationship between these ayat is living honesty, is living integrity, is living the truth, and is embracing the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so when you look at the ayah and it says, يَوْمَ يَجْمَعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ. What is, in English, you can't start a sentence with saying the day, or you can't start a sentence in that way. But in Arabic, يوم, this would basically start out to tell you, well, that day, on that day, kind of like saying once upon a time, okay? Kind of like saying once upon a time. Well, that would be in the past, right? But يوم يجمع الله الرسل, this would be talking about the future, that once there's gonna come a time, okay? What is going to happen? يَجْمَعَ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ. The Lord Almighty would combine all the prophets. In other words, why the prophets? Because they're the ones that had received the revelation. Now there's the announcement. What announcement? The announcement that they would make. Just like the witnesses, they were coming forth with an announcement, with a claim, with a witness. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing forth the main witnesses that the revelation was sent onto humanity. And then comes the word, يَوْمَ يَجْمَعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ. On that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather the prophets. And what does that mean? He would gather the prophets to make the statement. Or is it اذكروا أو احذروا? Is it to tell us just an information? Is it an informative clause? Or is it a clause to tell us, well, you gotta be careful. You gotta be a person that is aware of the magnificence of that day. That's another taqdeer. What is it, taqdeer? التقدير is basically an inference. So the inference in this ayah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, يَوْمَ يَجْمَعُ اللَّهُ الرُّسُلَ, it's not necessarily to just give you an informative clause. The inference here is to tell you of how magnificent that day is. And that's why التقدير, which actually means the inference, is to tell us, remember and warn of that day that is Judgment Day and the day of the rising, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would combine all the prophets and the prophets and the messengers, and then this would basically be a word of caution, a word of warning, and then فَيَقُولُ مَاذَا أُجِبْتُمْ. He would say, what did you respond? So, ماذا أجبتم? Wait a minute. Is it ماذا أجبتم? Is it what did they respond to you? Or is he asking them, did you deliver the message? No. He's asking them, what did they respond? Because he knows they had delivered the message. And he knows what they had responded. But this is to make a complete trial, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all just, and He's letting them see a complete trial right before their eyes. ماذا أجبتم? What did they respond to you? What did you teach? Etc. ماذا أجبتم? What did your people answer you? And how did they, when you had preached to them the revelation, what did they say? Did they accept it? قالوا لا علم لنا. They said, we don't know how they responded. This لا علم لنا. The scholars of Tafseer, they had differences of opinions on لا علم لنا. Is it that, one, when they said, we don't know, is it that they are saying, well, we don't know what they're concealing on the inside and what they were really hiding? Were they really believing in what the revelation was saying? Were they running away? Were they hypocrites? What happened later? We're not really sure. We're not really sure what later happened. That's the first interpretation, because they just wanted to say, well, what they were concealing and what happened later, well, we died to know how far the revelation went and how people embraced it and so forth. The second interpretation, that the scholars said, well, what they wanted to say, لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. The inference is لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا, similar to how the malaika, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked them the question, they just said, out of the adab, out of the etiquette in speaking to the Lord Almighty, they would say, we would not have any knowledge unless you had given us such ilm. So, therefore, part of the sentence is omitted, but the inference in the context is saying that, well, what they are saying, لا علم لنا, that's not the complete sentence. The complete sentence is carrying within it that we don't know except what you had informed us of, but we don't really know how far the revelation had affected them, what they had implemented, what they didn't implement, what the later generations have done. We don't know all that information. You would know it. Okay, so let's see. And the other interpretation said, إنهم يذهلون من هول ذلك ويفزعون عن الجواب. Now that one is rather odd. What does it mean? The third interpretation said that they would be in complete fear from the magnificence of that day, that they would يذهلون عن الجواب. What does يذهلون عن الجواب mean? الذهول is when you're in complete fear, that you are in a panicky mode, that you basically lost your ability to even understand and process ideas. What happens? that a person in a panicky mode, in a fearful mode, that they would just يذهل. They just all of a sudden they just go blank. So they said, لا علم لنا. And of course, they were just right there, sounding off that ذهول, sounding off that fear. And they said, لا علم لنا. We don't know. Why? Because at that moment, they were in complete fear that they said, we don't know. No word to say. But al-Qurtubi said, that's not actually accurate, because the prophets and the messengers do not face fear, and they would not face sorrow. Sorry, that wasn't al-Qurtubi, but that was in Nahas. Nahas is actually a great scholar in Arabic. We did talk about him before, so no need to go back. And he said, that is in Nahas, sorry, objected to this tafsir. But al-Qurtubi, on the other hand, said, well, your objection in Nahas is not accurate, because on Judgment Day, there are different stations. And in one of the ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ had said, إِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ إِذَا جِيءَ بِهَا زَفَرَتْ زَفْرَةً فَلَا يَبْقَى نَبِيٌّ وَلَا صِدِّيقٌ إِلَّا جَثَى لِرُكْبَتَيْهِ. Ya Rabbi. He said, because we have in al-Khabar, in a hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ had said that there's going to come a time where when hellfire is exposed, then there would be a sound, a breathing sound, a very loud breathing sound. It sounds like as if, as if there was gases trapped, and then all of a sudden it is exposed. The gases that were trapped is basically opened up, and the gases that were trapped, it just makes a sound, a blasting sound or a breathing sound. And he said, not a prophet and not a saint would at that time see this, but completely fall and drop to the ground on their knees. You could see that this basically is a hadith that was mentioned by Abu Nu'aym an Ka'b al-Ahbar. So let's continue right there. And he said, the Prophet ﷺ had said, خوفني جبريل يوم القيامة حتى أبكاني فقلت يا جبريل ألم يغفر لي ما تقدم من ذنبي وما تأخر؟ فقال لي يا محمد لتشهدن من هول ذلك اليوم ما ينسيك المغفرة. He said, Jibreel had gotten me scared of Judgment Day to the point that I started crying. And I said, oh Jibreel, didn't Allah forgive all my sins, the ones that I would commit in the future and the ones that I had committed in the past? So he said, oh Muhammad, you will see of that day fear that it would make you forget all the forgiveness. Now, this hadith, you could see that those that had reviewed this Tafseer al-Qurtubi, they said, لم نقف عليه. They said, لم نقف عليه. In other words, we couldn't find any trace for this hadith in order to judge its level of authenticity. But
Alhamdulillah. It's scary.
It's so scary. It's so scary. Is it when he says لم نقف عليه, does that mean that this will not happen? Does this mean that this hadith has no trace of authenticity? It just means we don't have the trace to scrutinize its level of authenticity. It doesn't make it, it is classified as a hadith da'if because we don't have the trace to scrutinize and verify the level of authenticity for this hadith, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it might not contain truth. We just don't really have the chain of narration to judge and scrutinize and verify the hadith, but it could be true. What al-Qurtubi wanted to say is that when they said لا علم لنا, he said قلت, that is al-Qurtubi, he said, and I would say, if فإن كان السؤال عند زفرة جهنم كما قال بعضهم فقول مجاهد والحسن صحيح. And he said, if the evidence proves that the sound of hellfire is this loud sound and it would be a place of fear, that even prophets and messengers are fearful of that on Judgment Day, then the interpretation that لا علم لنا is basically a moment giving a description that they were in a moment of complete fear, that they couldn't recognize how to respond to such a question. ماذا أجبتم? How did they respond to you? Did they accept the revelation? Did they embrace it? Did they implement it? What did they do? So they said, لا علم لنا. At that moment, it was such a fearful moment. So in Nahas, then the same scholar, he said, well, what is actually more accurate in the interpretation of this is that what did you respond in private and in public? And therefore, that was not a tawbih lil-anbiya, but a tawbih lil-kuffar. This was not rebuking the prophets, but this was actually rebuking the disbelievers when they said لا علم لنا فيكون هذا تكذيبا لمن اتخذ المسيح إلها. And that way, this would be a response, and this would be to reject basically whoever would claim that Prophet Isa alayhi salam had claimed that he was the son of God, that, well, there, right there, the prophets don't know, just as Prophet Isa alayhi salam doesn't know of any of what you had claimed. And it was something that you had made up and not the prophet teaching. قال ابن جريج ماذا أجبتم? Ibn Jurayj, we talked about him before. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling them, ماذا أجبتم? How did they respond to you? That means, what did they do after you? In other words, the generations after you, the revelation, you passed it on. What did they do with it? And that's when they said, well, we don't know. And that's why Abu Ubaid is actually a very important scholar, and I think he wasn't actually given the, let's say, the honor that he deserves. He was one of those scholars that wrote in the fiqh of money and also other things, but fiqh of money is probably, you ask me, I think the fiqh of transactions is the hardest type of fiqh. Anyhow, he said in this, similar to the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ said, يَرِدُ عَلَيَّ أَقْوَامٌ الْحَوْض فَيُخْتَلَجُونَ فَأَقُولُ أُمَّتِي فَيُقَالُ إِنَّكَ لَا تَدْرِي مَا أَحْدَثُوا بَعْدَكَ. He said when he would be on that lake, that would be ماء نهر الكوثر. Remember, Nahr al-Kawthar, the spring starts from Jannah, but then it continues to flow outside of Jannah in a spring, and that would be Nahr al-Kawthar. Then on Judgment Day, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would make a long prostration and then rise, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell him, Ishfa' tushaffa' wasal tu'ta. Then the Prophet ﷺ is given the privilege, because he had made the dua, the invocation, to be the one that would make that intercession. So then he would make the intercession, and at that moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he would intercede to start Judgment Day, and he would also intercede for the believers. So then he would stand right next to that spring of Nahr al-Kawthar, and with his hands, with his own palms, he would basically give the people to drink from that. Then, يَرِدُ عَلَيَّ أَقْوَامٌ الْحَوْض. Some people would attempt to come in order to drink from this lake. but فَيُخْتَلَجُونَ. يُخْتَلَجُون meaning the malaika would push them away. No, you're not included. So the Prophet ﷺ would say, they're part of the nation. In other words, they're supposed to be with us. So the Prophet ﷺ would be told, إِنَّكَ لَا تَدْرِي مَا أَحْدَثُوا بَعْدَكَ. You don't know what they had done after you. In other words, that's the part. You don't know what they had done. Yes, they may appear that they were part of the nation, but they were actually munafiqeen, or they didn't stay committed and consistent with whatever you had taught. And certainly, right there, al-Mawardi said, سألهم عما هو أعلم به منهم فعنه جوابان. So when, of course, فلما سألهم عما هو أعلم به منهم. Someone might say, al-Mawardi is a Shafi'i madhab, huge al-Hawi, is in almost maybe 22, 21, 23 volumes. It's big. All right. And he said, well, if someone were to say, فَلِمَ سَأَلَهُمْ عَمَّا هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِهِ مِنْهُمْ, why would he ask them about something that he himself would have more information about? And he said there are two responses to this one. Number one, أنه سألهم ليعلمهم ما لم يعلموا من كفر أممهم ونفاقهم وكذبهم عليهم من بعدهم. The first one, the response, is that he had asked them in order to let them know that they don't really know the details of how their nations had later basically were not committed, and how they were hypocrites, and how they denied, and how they changed basically the revelation. The second one, أراد أن يفضحهم بذلك على رؤوس الأشهاد, that the Lord Almighty wanted to expose them on all the people and in front of everyone. That way it would be a punishment to them. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم اذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك. When the Lord Almighty described on that day. So when you say إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم, this is to say when the Lord Almighty then says, O Isa, the son of Maryam, remember the blessings that I had blessed you with. It's exactly like اذكر يوم يجمع الله الرسل. Remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had combined or gathered all the prophets. So right there, just like it said يوم يجمع الله الرسل, same thing, إذ قال. So the word إذ is very similar to يوم. It's basically to take you to remembering. It's to take you to see the correlation of that day. And certainly is when he said, so why do you say Ya Isa ibn Maryam? Why not just say Ya Isa? Or is it Ibn Maryam is giving Isa ibn Maryam, is it to let us know? Or is it to call out twice in order to give honor? Differences of opinions. Ya Isa is one. When I would say, for example, Ustadha, and I would say Umayma or Umayya. Okay, so what do I said Ustadha, this is to give an honor, and then Umayya, this is to give the second honor, to name the name. Okay, Ya Isa, to give the first honor, Ibn Maryam, to give the second honor. That was another interpretation. Udhkur ni'mati alayk. Remember the blessings that I had blessed you with. So why did he tell him اذكر نعمتي عليك? Is it to show them that they were given some exclusivity, that they were given miracles that other nations did not actually see? Or is it to let them know that all of those things that were later mentioned in this ayah, that they were actually given to him بِإِذْنِ, بِإِذْنِ, بِإِذْنِ. They were all given to him by the Lord Almighty's power and not by his. I'm going to stop right there because I have an appointment to go to. But inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. There's a lot to say, so don't go away. We're almost done with Surah Al-Ma'idah. Okay, so subhanakallah wa hamdika astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Sorry, but I gotta go for my appointment. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
جزاك الله ألف خير.
الله يرضى عنك يا رب ويحفظك.
جزاك
السلام
الله خير. السلام عليكم.
ما شاء الله جزاك الله خيرا. This is so enlightening. جزاك الله خير.
الله يحفظك يا رب.
We can sleep after this scary stuff. اللهم أجرنا.
What happened?
Yeah, the ayat very scary. And ahadith, MashaAllah.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. Ameen. Inshallah, see you guys tomorrow.
إن شاء الله على خير.